All right, so I know it took forever getting this out, but in my last anime review, I said that I would be talking about the Demon Slayer movie and kind of how I felt about it. Things that I thought were really positive and things that I thought were, kind of hindrances to the movie. Just a fair warning, this is mild spoilers. I'm not going to go out and like ruin details of the movie overall, but there will be, like, if you don't want to know anything about this movie at all going in, this is your fair warning. So let's get into this. So in the end of the last season, obviously we all saw all of the Hashira and Tanjiro, of course, falling into the Infinity Castle, obviously with Zenitsu and Yosuke and shit. Here we are. We know that the next basically 3 movies is just going to be this crazy battle between the Kizuki and the Hashira and everybody involved, right? So, just to start off with right away, this was a great movie. The movie broke the box office and all that, so I don't think you need me to tell you that this movie was a hit. The animation obviously is a W every single time. Ufotable. This is a given at this point. Overall, I think a lot of the way the storytelling was done was really good. There was just a couple different parts and aspects to the way the storytelling took place that I just felt lacked a little bit. It felt like there was just a huge lack of getting to see, different characters. Obviously, it's a tough balance. There's a lot of different characters involved in this, people that you got to get to, and there's, different battles. If you know the manga at all, there's a lot of different battles that take place, and they're all pretty important. So you kind of have to split it up somehow. There's just a lot of characters that you really don't get to see and what they're kind of up to at all. I imagine that, the way it's being told is kind of like this is kind of happening at the same time as this, and that's just really implied. There's really not a whole lot to say about the movie other than, it was really, 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 really good. But this leads into my main point. As good as it was, I personally just think it would have been infinitely better if it just was seasonal. I think that, like, as the storytelling goes, this being in movie format does it a huge disservice. Perhaps it does a lot of service in the means of the animation and the budget and the timing and the ability to tell the story, but ultimately I think that it does the story a huge disservice because of the way that they choose to tell it, and just the difference between going to the theater and watching a movie, which, by the way, this movie was vastly longer than I anticipated it to be. It's a pretty long movie, and you're sitting there watching all this stuff. It's like power watching an anime, but even quicker in a way. Like, things are happening so much faster. And that's really this movie's biggest weakness, because ultimately the biggest problem is there's a lot of stuff that just gets totally overshadowed in this movie, that if you had watched it in episodic fashion, in an episodic format, the way you would watch a normal anime, that you would have had time to experience a lot of the things that happen and then, sit on it for a week until the next episode comes out. We would have had each one of these battles might have lasted a couple episodes or so, and then you would have had a lot more time to digest it. And as a season, it would have still felt fast, but it would have felt engaging, exciting, and memorable. However, the problem I have is once you leave the theater, or, now it's out on digital, which is another reason why I feel like this is a perfect time to kind of talk about this. Once you finish watching the movie, there's a lot of things that hit hard when they were happening, but they kind of fall off by the time you're done watching it, because the things that happen at the end and the main event of the movie kind of just overshadows everything else in the movie. And I just felt like that was a huge hindrance for me. And I have a couple examples. And the number one example is, I'll start with the number 2 example first, was Shinobu versus Doma. Right. And this, I'm not going to get into a lot of details on this. This was a huge moment within the movie. A lot of character development going on, a lot of different, it was very climactic for a character arc, and it was very, very, very good, done very, very well. And it was a beautifully choreographed fight. And I think you get to see a lot of the payout for something that you were looking forward to throughout, I think, this is that time we get to see the Hashira shine. This is that time that we get to see the Hashira do their thing that, we get glimpses of here and there, but they're all here doing their thing. And especially someone like Shinobu, like, you wonder, okay, well, she's got the needle for the blade. She's obviously very threatening, but they call her the weakest of the Hashira. And you question a lot of these things, right? And you're like, okay, well, what's she really made of? And you get to really see it, and it's really awesome. But the next one, and, in a way, I feel like it's one of the biggest ones, especially with kind of the teasing that was done at the end of the last season, the Zenitsu fight. You know, if you remember, at this is a little small spoiler again if you haven't watched the last season, but Zenitsu had received that letter, and it goes on to talk about his grandpa and who, you know, who killed him, and that really caused Zenitsu to start locking in, and he just didn't seem as scared. And you know, the classic Zenitsu that we came to know, he totally changed, and he's just ready to, you know, get it in now. Here it is. You can see right here, you know, he's been this trembling boy this entire time, and this is him consciously as his self becoming a man and getting his business handled. And this is one of the, in my opinion, this is one of the biggest arcs in the entirety of the series, because you know, you see this childish boy who has a secret talent be able to find himself and a reason to find himself and grow and wake up and become, you know, a menace basically. And the problem with this here is this entire fight, especially even after following what happens in the Shinobu fight and then the end, which, you know, this is another mild spoiler, but one of the big fights in this movie is the Akaza fight towards the end, and they spend a lot of time in the Akaza fight. It's one of the main things in the trailer. Trust me, like when I say this, the Akaza fight is phenomenal. Of course, you get a whole lot of classic Demon Slayer tropes, and just everything kind of ties into it, but I think Akaza is one of a fan favorite for a lot of different people, and you know, he deserves all the screen time and everything. But the events of the Akaza fight just entirely overshadow pretty much the entirety of the movie. And again, you know, I just feel like if it was episodic and we got to experience it one episode, then the other, and then, you know, got to sit with one event before the next event came out, I feel like this would have been one of the highest, like I mean, this was obviously as a movie incredibly successful and one of the heights of, you know, the story of Demon Slayer. But it's very much, I feel like it would have played out a lot better as, you know, everything that we wanted to see come to a head was coming to a head a little bit more respectfully for those arcs that each character is having. And that does give me concerns for the next movies, because, you know, there's still a lot to unpackage here for the rest of the movies and the rest of the show. You know, it gives me that concern with 2 more movies, that it's not that I don't think that they can do it and that they can't do a really good job. It's just, am I gonna kind of walk away with an extremely main event between, you know, certain characters being overshadowed by events between other characters? Usually at the end of each movie, you can imagine that it's probably going to be Tanjiro, and whatever major battle he is involved in at the end of each movie is probably going to be the highlight. I could be wrong, of course. And then that is obviously just going to kind of overshadow any of the incredible moments and character moments or character growth that you're going to get from just about any of the other characters. And there's a lot of characters that, you know, we still got to focus on for 2 whole more movies. And I have had much of the manga spoiled for me. There is a lot to unpack. That's pretty much it. You know, I give the movie, I can't even give the movie a rating. It's a wonderful movie, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a great movie. I can't knock the movie as a whole. I can't sit here and say by any means that it's a bad movie. It's just that I can't shake the feeling that it would have played out better, for me personally at least, if they had just done it episodically. Of course, obviously it wouldn't pay out for them the same, because they wouldn't have made nearly as much money. They wouldn't have made nearly as much hype. You know, I would think they would make this choice 10 times over. But at the end of the day, as us, the fans, the people who enjoy Demon Slayer and want more Demon Slayer and want to experience this truly, I feel like we all would have had it play out a lot better for us if it was just one fight is 1 episode, maybe 2 episodes, and then you get to sit on it after each episode is over for a week and digest it, and then it would make a lot more of the important sequences feel more important, because they would have had their time to shine. They would have been standing in the spotlight for a minute instead of kind of having their moment to play only to get overshadowed by something bigger and more dramatic than the last, you know. But y'all take it easy. If y'all want to give me any anime to review in the comments and stuff, you know, leave your ideas in the comments. If I haven't seen it, you know, leave me your recommendations and stuff like that. But other than that, y'all take it easy, and I'll catch you on the next one. Hopefully it won't be so long.